Hello, everyone. This is Joey Rolandelli, the OPAL Center Director for the Baltimore County Department of Aging. And I am here with Dawn Marie Steenstra
Steenstra.
with Entourage Consulting, and she's going to talk to us all about cannabis use and how it is beneficial for our senior members. Take it away, Dawn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is my second event with OPAL, and I'm very excited to be participating in this platform. I think it's wonderful to have this available to our seniors across Baltimore County. So my name is Dawn Marie Steenstra. I've been a nurse out in the field since 1996. I specialize in gerontology, hospice, palliative care, and community health. I was the owner and administrator and primary caregiver of Rolling View Care Home. It was one of the first home-based assisted living facilities. I actually helped the state write the regulations back in the 1980s. And what I did is I took care of patients that were being thrown out of psych hospitals back in the 1980s. And I did that for 22 years. And about 12 years ago, I met my my now husband, who has been in the hemp industry for about 30 years, Eric Steenstra, and he introduced me to Patients Out of Time, which was a conference that we attended. And it's a medical conference that brings all of the research to America about cannabis. And I was just floored being a hospice nurse. Fun fact, I was also a breast cancer survivor back in 2010. So I was really appalled that this wasn't available for my patients nor for myself. So I dove right in and I joined the American Cannabis Nurses Association. I was on their formation board of directors. Americans for Safe Access is a program that they work with the federal government in trying to get states approved for medical cannabis safe access. I worked for United Patients Group as a national ambassador since 2016. And when our Maryland program came up, I worked with the state in having good education available to our doctors. I had a group called We Can that I had formed of a bunch of nurses, and we had all kinds of people, professional people, who were willing to go out and educate folks when our medical cannabis program was coming up. And I also was blessed to win a dispensary license back then and helped to open one of the first mission dispensaries down in Silver Spring. So now I have been approved as a clinical director of dispensaries in Maryland. I no longer own that dispensary down in Silver Spring, but I do care for multiple dispensaries in the Maryland area as a clinical director. And what a clinical director does is we actually are available in every dispensary in Maryland where a patient or a person who wishes to use cannabis for health conditions can come and contact us and answer all their questions. Or we help them figure out the right cannabinoids, the right terpenes, the right blends of medicine that we have in the Maryland market to help with whatever their conditions are. I personally do consults through my website, Entourage Consulting Services. All of my dispensaries funnel patients down to me, and I research your case. I look at your medications. I figure out exactly what would work or help most likely to try to save money and save time in learning how to utilize cannabis for health. So that's a little bit about me. So my talk today is on cannabis and baby boomers, because God forbid I've actually reached that point of being a senior citizen, and I am now actually needing this help myself. So as we all know, 80 is now the new 70, 70 is the new 60. It used to be 50 was the new 40, but people are living longer than ever nowadays. The geriatric statistics from the World Health Organization are that almost 700 million people will be over the age of 60 worldwide right now. 13% of those are over the age of 80. And the expectation by 2050 is to have over 1.5 billion people in the world over the age of 60. And for the first time, this is surpassing those under the age of 5 years old in the next few years. So people are living longer, as we know, many times healthier and much more active these days, well into their 80s and 90s. And seniors, interestingly enough, account for 34% of prescription drug use in the US, as well as 30% of the over-the-counter use. So the thing that we notice the most when I've been working in long-term care, we have an issue with our physicians with older folks called polypharmacy. And this is when they stack meds one on top of another. Instead of discontinuing one, they'll add more to that mix. And I found that when I was working in the field, that people were starting a day with an average of 10 to 15 medications. Okay. And a lot of times this was 10 to 15, or multiple times a day. With all these medications, I found a lot of people were taking these medications even before breakfast. And it hurt me because I'm crushing up these meds for these people. And it's no wonder there was a lack of appetite. It's no wonder we had issues with people having constipation issues. It's no wonder that we had people who were feeling nauseated and didn't have a good appetite in eating. So we find that these doctors are doing a lot of the same class, multi-class polypharmacy, and they don't trial it before stopping another. And we call this stacking. One of the things that I want everybody to be aware of in this audience is that there is a list called the Beers list. And these are potentially inappropriate medications for use in older adults. And this is updated in 2015, and I believe it's been updated recently from the American Geriatric Society. These are meds that are not supposed to be mixed, not supposed to be given, not supposed to be prescribed for those who are older and over the age of 55. So the risks of the drug interactions, compliance adherence of taking meds, and the adverse effects do increase with each additional medication. So we find that a lot of times doctors, if one pain medication doesn't work, they won't stop one, they'll add another. Or if an antidepressant doesn't work, they won't stop one, they'll add another. And as a result, each medication has its own side effects. So those side effects just stack one on top of another, and we never get to the root cause because the root cause is a drug that was prescribed 5 to 10 years ago. So now we have cannabis. Cannabis is a plant, and this is a healthcare option now. We found out in Israel is where a lot of these studies began, but we found out in Israelite studies that the calming effects of cannabis on the neurological system of humans, it steadies Parkinson's tremors, seizures, spasms. It helps with pain management, appetite improves, dementia patients are able to verbalize and engage with their environment. And we're also finding that it actually slows Alzheimer's disease and possibly reverses it as it chomps away at the amyloid plaques that they're finding in patients that have died from Alzheimer's disease. And Israel has reduced polypharmacy in the nursing home that I was talking about at the last slide by over 50% by utilizing cannabis formulations. In legal states in the United States, Medicare has saved $165 million in drug costs already. And in legal states, overdoses of medicines and narcotics have also diminished by over 25%. So what is cannabis? As you can see, I'm sure this is what you visualize cannabis as being. You remember the leaf, you remember people smoking, whether it's a joint, whether it's a bowl, but this is the way most people believe that this is what cannabis is all about. Cannabis is a plant. It's actually a genus of flowering plants that include 3 different species originally. It was Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, and Cannabis ruderalis. However, because of the heavy inbreeding for higher THC value by growers in legal states, there are very, very, very few true sativa or indica plants being grown anymore. And most products that we find on the market are actually a hybrid of both. So a lot of times we look at the packaging of a product to see what the potential effects might be nowadays, because a sativa is not necessarily to sativa. Another thing you might want to be aware of is if you have what's called a paradoxical relationship with the drug Benadryl. Most people take Benadryl to sleep. If Benadryl would hype you up, that would actually mean that a sativa-leaning plant would do better for you for relaxation as opposed to an indica. The old adage was sativa was an uplifting plant. It was tall, thin leaves, and it was usually made for an invigorating response. Cannabis indica was meant to be in the couch or relaxed or slow down. And Cannabis ruderalis was just a cannabis that was found grown in the wild. So a lot of people wonder about hemp. It's one plant, it is a cannabis plant, but it has a tremendous amount of uses. The component parts of the cannabis plant have been used for thousands of years for its strong fiber, textiles, seed oil, and medicine from the flowers. We have cannabis that's actually used in car parts, in BMW car panels, in 3D printing, in insulation and bedding for animals. It's been used as fuel. It's been used for food. It's environmentally safe, and it's also regenerative to the soil. So as you can see, we have hemp genes up here and hemp twine, hemp seed and seed oil that can be eaten and added to granola. And we also have something called hempcrete that they have actually built homes with. So hemp has so many different uses. So what is hemp versus medical cannabis? A lot of people are wondering because hemp was actually made legal in 2018. It was descheduled from the CSA, the Controlled Substances Act. So hemp is a distinct seed oil and fiber variety of the plant species Cannabis sativa. It's specifically grown for seed and fiber. While drug varieties of cannabis contain high levels of THC or tetrahydrocannabinol, typically these are at 15 to 30%, hemp usually contains under 1% THC, which is the intoxicating molecule of the cannabis plant. So in the 2018 Farm Bill, hemp was descheduled from the CSA and CBD exploded. Everybody suddenly wanted to grow hemp, and suddenly everybody wanted CBD. And what happened is we had an absolute glut of CBD. And what happened is that they took the CBD and they extracted it, and then they started selling CBD as an isolate. And they had this glut of isolate CBD. And what a lot of countries did is they would import CBD, like kilos, just like cocaine or whatever. And they're turning this into other products by washing it with acid and other things. And we see this on the open market now where it's unregulated, it is not safe, it's packaged attractive to children, and it's something that we all need to be aware of and everyone needs to warn people about. These are products that we do not have regulations on. They are not tested. They are dangerous right now. We do not know what they can actually do long-term to the human body because there have never been studies on them. So when you see these synthetic cannabinoids being sold on the open market, such as THCO, D8, D10, or HHC in public, please do not utilize these products. Maryland is a legal cannabis state now. You can go into any dispensary and you can purchase anything that you want on the recreational side of the dispensary as far as trying a true cannabis product. So as a real quick reminder, hemp is distinct from marijuana, just like a Chihuahua and a St. Bernard are unique breeds of the same species. THC cannabis being the St. Bernard and hemp being our Chihuahua. So in the history of cannabis as medicine, the Eastern history, Shenyang was the emperor of China, 2737 BC, and he was the father of Chinese medicine. And we have from him the Divine Farmer's Herb Root Classic, which is the original earliest Chinese pharmacopoeia. The ancient Chinese guide to agriculture and the use of herbal medicines. And these remedies were recorded and handed down generation to generation to generation. And each country had their own specific types and breeds of cannabis flower because India had their own, China had their own. So a lot of these, what we call landrace strains or varietals are really no longer even available. So cannabis in Western medicine started out in an interesting way because Queen Victoria in England had sent William Brooke O'Shaughnessy over to India to check out what they had been using called Bang. And Queen Victoria actually sent him over and he brought back Bang and Indian cannabis, and Queen Victoria used this for her menstrual cramps back in the day. So as a result, in America, these preparations were also prepared into the 1800s. So in the 1800s, we also had different cannabis medicines, and you can see we had Park Davis, we had Eli Lilly, we had Victor. All of these two companies in particular, Eli Lilly and Park Davis, are still in existence today, the companies, although they no longer make the cannabis formulations. And it's funny because if you look at the ingredients, I mean, some of these ingredients are scary. In this infant's relief formula, they have chloroform. That's kind of a depressing type of thought. So I guarantee you the baby was quiet, but heavens to Betsy. So we had cannabis medicine at one time, but during in the 1930s, they levied what was called the Marijuana Tax Act. And this was a result of Harry Anslinger's work. So Harry Anslinger, he was actually in charge of the Department of Alcohol back in the 1930s. And this was back before alcohol prohibition was lifted. When alcohol prohibition lifted, then Harry Anslinger didn't have a job. So he had been noticing that marijuana had been coming up through Mexico, and the jazz singers back in the 1930s and 1920s were doing this. And they actually even created this film called Reefer Madness, because they turned out that they actually, from policies that were steeped in racism and rhetoric and lies, they created this huge thing that cannabis was a dangerous plant, and it made people crazy. And Harry Anslinger had some terrible things to say. He had said that, there are over 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the US, and most of these are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. And this is just horrible. And if this information doesn't disturb you, then you aren't listening. So in 1937, they levied down this Marijuana Tax Act, and it was basically so expensive to grow cannabis that people just quit growing it. So the way we got here is over time, people quit growing cannabis. And then in 1961, there was a UN Single Convention Treaty that was done. And this was on narcotic drugs. And this was as the upcoming hippie movement happened. And President Nixon decided in 1970 to develop the Controlled Substance Act. This Controlled Substance Act quantified cannabis as having no accepted medical use, high potential for abuse, and no history of safety in use for medical, which was actually a lie, because as I showed you, we actually had cannabis medicines back in the 1930s, 1920s. So in the 1970s, Robert Randall was a patient who grew his own cannabis for his glaucoma, and he took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. And he actually won the right to utilize cannabis for his glaucoma back in the 1970s. And the government, as a result, started a new program, an investigational new drug program, to investigate how cannabis could help patients. Now, this was right around the time that HIV was coming up and AIDS. So this was kind of like geared towards the AIDS population back then. And people signed up so fast and furious for this program that they actually had to cut off the program at 15 individuals. And this is Irv Rosenfeld. He is one of the living people who still get their cannabis from the University of Mississippi for his healthcare conditions. I think we have about 3 people still living of the original 15 IND patients. So 1988, they did an investigation, and administrative law judge Francis Young determined that marijuana in its natural form is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. By any measure of rational analysis, marijuana can be safely used within the supervised routine of medical care. This was a ruling made in 1988 that was literally denied and shoved under the rug. In 1985, they decided to develop a synthetic form of THC, which was the dangerous portion of cannabis, and it's known as Marinol or Dronabinol. And this is a Schedule 3 pharmaceutical that is available to this day. It's in 2.55 and 10 milligram capsules in sesame oil. In 1996, Proposition 215 and House Bill 420 made California the very first medical cannabis program in the entire United States. And from there, it just spread like wildfire. We also have federal patents and pharmaceutical developments. There's been a federal patent on cannabis for a long time, number 866-30507, for antioxidant neuroprotectant value of cannabis. There's a cancer patent by GW Pharmaceuticals from 2017. Epidiolex has been developed from cannabis and obtained its FDA approval in 2018. And this is cannabidiol. This is concentrated CBD for use in seizure, with certain seizure disorders. And the United Kingdom has Sativex, which is a 1-to-1 THC to CBD ratio that they've had on the market for years. So THC was discovered in 1964 by Raphael Mechoulam over in Israel. As I told you, Israel has so much of the original research that was done. So THC and CBD were discovered by Raphael Mechoulam in Israel. Until that discovery and isolation of the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol molecule, scientists didn't understand what caused the psychoactive effect of cannabis. They were trying to tease out which molecule in the cannabis did that, and they determined that the THC was that molecule. And since then, multiple components, including THC, CBC, CBD, CBG, and not to mention all the terpenes and flavonoids, which give cannabis its unique smell and its unique taste, have been identified within the cannabis plant. Each of these things has its own unique therapeutic use in health and wellness. There are over 400 chemicals in the cannabis plant. So it's very difficult for a pharma company to market cannabis because the cannabis plant has over 400 beneficial ingredients, where you can only isolate one isolated molecule to create a pharmaceutical drug. So then in 1988, we also discovered the 12th major body system, which is known as the endocannabinoid system. This system is the master neuroregulator to maintain homeostasis or balance in the human body. And homeostasis is maintained in humans by the ability to eat, sleep, relax, forget, and protect. And it's interesting because if you look at what cannabis does to the human brain and to the human body, it helps all of these things occur. A lot of people wonder, why forget? Well, interestingly enough, the cannabis helps you forget, and it helps a lot in mental illness with PTSD. One of the interesting side effects of cannabis is if you take cannabis to sleep, you also will not dream. Most people do not dream on cannabis. So just as a interesting sideline, I have actually been utilizing cannabis CBD full spectrum for about 8 years for pain management. After going through narcotics and everything for over 18 years after a bad car accident, I haven't had a dream in over 8 years. So I miss it a little bit, but I much prefer being pain-free and being able to sleep at night. So the endocannabinoid system is a system within the body that are receptors called CB1 and CB2. CB1 receptors are throughout the body, from the brain to the spinal column to the periphery. CB2 receptors are in the immune system and other systems in the body. THC fits like a key in a lock in the CB1 receptors. We find that THC will absolutely turn on the CB1 receptors. CB2 is a little bit more vague, and we find that CBD and other minor cannabinoids do affect the CB2 receptor as well. And the interesting thing about cannabis is it's so interesting the way this actually works. And I'm going to explain this as we go along. These are receptors. The neuroreceptors go from one cell to another. I'm going to explain how this happens. So first, we have 3 different kinds of cannabinoids that we're working with. We have endocannabinoids, which are natural endogenous cannabinoids inside of our bodies that we create on demand under stress. So when we need to calm ourselves down, or when we need to relax, we can breathe through it. People meditate through it. People exercise through it. If you've ever heard of a runner's high, that explains a lot about how you can keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. And at some point, your brain breaks across the barrier and you can do a lot more than you normally can with that runner's high, is what we call it. Next are phytocannabinoids. Now, these are the plant-based cannabinoids. Phyto means plant. So the cannabis plant has the same chemical compounds that our endocannabinoid system does. So that's why the cannabis plant works so well within the human species. Then we have the synthetic cannabinoids that I told you about that are being marketed as a pharmaceutical known as Marinol and Dronabinol. So every species except for insects have an endocannabinoid system. So anything with a spinal column has an endocannabinoid system. Natural endocannabinoids are produced on demand within our bodies under stress. They're known as anandamide and 2-AG. I can't pronounce the AG one consistently. And phytocannabinoids are produced in the glandular trichomes of the cannabis flower. And these fit right into the CB1 and CB2 receptors, just like a key in a lock. So if you look at these pictures, we have a cannabis leaf, cannabis plant, cannabis flower. On these flower, you can see these little tiny bulbous things that we call trichomes. The trichomes, this is where all of the magic happens. The resinous trichomes are filled with active cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids that when consumed, they mimic perfectly what our endocannabinoids do also. They ramp up or they slow down the neurotransmissions in the body by what is known as retrograde signaling. And this takes the body back to homeostasis. And usually it's done by a downregulation. We find that with epilepsy, the hyperness of the body is stopped with cannabis. In Parkinson's, tremors are stopped. Pain syndromes, where neurons are going back and forth so fast because of pain, stops. Anxiety stops. PTSD stops. Insomnia, people are able to sleep again. Extraction of these trichomes produces the formulations on the market that we see. So cannabis can also be used in all its forms, which is another interesting development. Raw cannabis has its active ingredients in the acids of the plant, CBDA, THCA, CBCA. All of the raw cannabis components are known as the acids. Then when it's heated or decarboxylated or burned, we also find it activates these acids into their stabilized chemicals such as THC, CBD, CBC, and CBG. And all of these chemicals, each one has its own unique benefit to the human body. And what we don't use, the body just excretes. So it's a wonderful thing. It's as if this was just discovered today, it would be the most breakthrough discovery ever in the medical field. So we also have aged cannabis, and aged cannabis also produces CBN, CBNA. There is a tiny bit of Delta 8, that just a tiny bit in aged old cannabis that they've found, but not like the Delta 8 that they're making in these products that are sold illegally. So next, I'm going to talk about administration methods. Like the original picture that I showed you, most people look at cannabis and they think, no, it's not just for smoking anymore. The most common way of getting cannabinoids into the human body is inhalation, however, mainly because of the instantaneous relief that it gives. With inhalation, we also have sprays, we have vaporizers, we have herb vaporizers that do not burn or combust the leaf material so that you won't get any kind of carcinogen whatsoever, and vape pens, and we have flower. So all of these, if you inhale them or you heat them and turn them into their stabilized form, that will take effect in your body within 5 minutes. You will know after one inhalation of a cannabis cigarette or one inhalation from a vaporizer or one inhalation from an inhaler, within 5 minutes, you're going to feel that in your head in some way, shape, or form, or your body in some way, shape, or form. Most people are familiar with cannabis in a gummy. Most of the things that we sell in the market are gummies of different kinds, capsules of different kinds, tablets of different kinds, lozenges. They have elixirs. They have cannabis oils or tinctures. Tinctures to me are the easiest, and gummies to dose for people. So we have so many different ways to take cannabis now that all work well within our bodies. We also have topicals, which are ointments and creams that go through the skin. They're great to use for arthritis syndromes, any kind of chronic pain issues, muscle spasms that happen. Topicals work really well for that. We used to make transdermal patches. I have not seen them on the market lately. And I actually went to a company and had bath bombs made because as a nurse, I was on my feet all the time. And I asked a company down in Rockville to please develop some CBD hemp bath bombs. And I've never had a more relaxing bath in my life. You take a bath bomb and you dissolve it in a hot bath and soak for about an hour, and you feel like Jello when you're done. It's absolutely wonderful. And I never would have thought that cannabis could absorb through the skin that well as a human being and as a nurse. We actually have also suppositories that a lot of women are using for endometriosis, pelvic pain. We're actually using cannabis suppositories for prostate issues, for any kind of lower back issues, because sometimes if you can get cannabis formulations up into the body, that way we can get more pain relief. And we also have something called full extract cannabis oil, or FICO, or Rick Simpson oil. And this is a highly, highly concentrated, it's sort of like taking an alcohol tincture and concentrating it down to its solid form again. It's what I call the 151 of, compared to alcohol. This is the strongest product we have on the market as far as natural whole plant cannabis formulations is the FICO or the Rick Simpson oil. A lot of our vape pens will also run very high in THC, but they are usually not a full spectrum product that has all the cannabinoids and all the terpenes and all the flavonoids. They're usually isolate products. So make sure you understand the difference between isolate products and whole plant, which is full spectrum and contains all of the different components of the cannabis plant. Isolate products are what we have on the market. A lot of what is made in the cannabis market in Maryland are different formulations that different companies have made. And the way to find out exactly what is in the products in Maryland is you look for a certificate of analysis. These are the lab results. Every product on the Maryland market is lab tested, which is a beautiful thing because you can actually look at a lab result and you can see what terpenes there are. By that way, you can find out what terpenes work well for you. It has the different cannabinoid profiles. What percentage of that product is what cannabinoid? And you can find out which cannabinoids work best for you. I personally go in and I look at all the research that's been done, and research comes in every day revolving around cannabis. So when you would do a consult with me, then I would certainly research your case, research your disease process, look at all of your medications, and look to see what cannabinoids, what terpenes would work best, as we know so far in the science for your condition. So I want to explain a little bit about the risk versus benefits, and you decide. My first public service warning is, though, overconsumption is not advised. So many people now think, they just want higher and higher THC because they just want to get as high as you can get. And frankly, over consuming is not a pleasant experience. It's comparable with a very bad paranoid drunk. If you've ever been that sick and that dizzy and that scared, you're not going to die, because no one has ever died from an overdose of cannabis in the history of the world. Okay. However, you're going to feel like you want to. So the common side effects besides an overconsumption event would be dry mouth, red, dry eyes, being very dizzy, nauseous, hunger or the munchies, thirst, sedation. There's no risk whatsoever of overdose or death. And CBD actually has little to no bad side effects. We know that if you take very, very high concentrated forms of CBD over time, it can lead to an elevation of liver enzymes, but that's about the only thing we've found so far as utilizing full spectrum CBD products. So on the flip side, what are the benefits? Okay, so we have 400 to 500 different compounds between Delta-9 and cannabidiol, which is CBD. So these are just a few of the good benefits we have of THC and CBD. THC is a huge anti-inflammatory. CBD is as well. I would say it's on the level of prednisone. Prednisone as a nurse was always a miracle drug, as far as it was the one thing that could pull people out of a very bad situation. I worked on a vent unit, so we used prednisone a lot to calm down the lungs. I would say that my experience so far with utilizing THC and CBD and other cannabis is that the anti-inflammatory processes of this plant are absolutely phenomenal. Pain relief, absolutely wonderful. Anti-nausea, I have in my resources I'll be showing you shortly, there's a whole PDF from the American Cancer Institute, an antispasmodic for and muscle relaxer for muscle spasms, appetite stimulant, anti-tumor. There's science out of Spain for glioblastoma multiforme, which is a very aggressive brain cancer that THC can actually kill cancer cells in a brain tumor. We are also finding that it's useful in cancer treatment. So it's very sedating, it's neuroprotective, it helps with insomnia and anti-anxiety. CBD has all the effects of the THC, plus it stops seizures, it's an appetite suppressant at times, it takes care of neuropathic pain, it's energizing, it helps with GI issues such as IBS, Crohn's disease, colitis. It helps with bone growth. It's an antipsychotic. It's a mood stabilizer. So we're going to find CBD being used a lot with mood stabilization, I think, along with other plant medicines. And it helps with autoimmune modulation in autoimmune disorders like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus. So in conclusion, I want you to know that cannabis cannot kill you. Cannabis can replace a multitude of pharmaceuticals. There are less risk of falls, actually, if you utilize cannabis compared to other medications and other drugs. Better appetite. Your pain can get under control. You're able to do more physically. Anxiety and depression subside. We can fight Alzheimer's disease, and quality of life is improved dramatically. So if you want a quick education on cannabis generally, Sanjay Gupta did a series called Weed on CNN. You have 1 through 8 now. 8 hours of education. I find that I recommend this to everyone who wants to get a fast education in cannabis that's very balanced as far as the way it's done. I was very impressed with the way Sanjay Gupta did this. And he actually went back on his original thoughts with cannabis, and he learned that we have been terribly and systematically misled for over 80 years now in the United States with this plant. And it's got to change. We have got to show people, and that's why I do what I do, that this is it's a gift. This plant is a gift to us. We can use it safely, very safely, for a lot of health issues. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take questions. And here is a list of my resources that I give to patients. For this year, we have the Maryland Cannabis Administration, how you become a patient if you want to become a patient, because in the market right now with the legal market and the adult use market and the medical market, you can only get certain types of medications that are higher THC content. The Society of Cannabis Clinicians is one of the best educational resources for our medical people, whether it be nurses, doctors, physicians, therapists. Patients Out of Time was that conference that I went to 12 years ago, where I learned about cannabis for the first time as a post-cancer patient, breast cancer patient, as well as a hospice nurse. Project CBD is one of the best resources to go to online in order to learn about cannabis and CBD, along with United Patients Group. And that National Cancer Institute paper I told you about with cancer is on the bottom. And we also have Americans for Safe Access, which is a political group trying to get access for all patients across the United States. So are there any questions? Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Dawn. That was very informative. I definitely learned some new information. Let's check the chat. Nancy says very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And
did everything seem clear? Is there anything that needs to be
very clear? Yes. This will be up on our YouTube page. If anyone wants to go back and revisit the information.
And this is my personal email down here, dawnmarie@entourageconsulting.net. If anybody would like to write to me or get a hold of me to check into doing a consult.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions pop up in the chat, and no one's speaking up. So I guess you answered all our questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If there's any other way I can help, please get a hold of me.
Will do. All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.